Hello, and welcome back to our podcast search tutorial series here on Turbo 360. In the previous video, we set up the components, as you can see here, and we passed data from the main app container component to these subcomponents. So these subcomponents are now rendering data that's being passed through from the the parent container. In this video, we're going to continue setting up the functionality by connecting the search bar. We're going to maintain the search term here in state, and then actually run a query for a search of podcasts, which will then populate this section here with actual podcast results from the search query. So that's it. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to run the server on localhost and make sure everything still works properly. Okay, and reload localhost 3000, and we're good to go. So everything here looks good. So now let's head back to the code. I'm going to turn off the server. I'm going to open another tab as well and run the dev build. And let that run in the background. And let's head back here. And in our index.js of the SRC, the main entry point of the app, this is what we worked on in the last video. So we have to now connect the search bar, which is right here, the search input, excuse me, which is right here, to the search functionality. The first thing we want to do is maintain this actual search term that's being entered into here. So when a user types a term into here, we want to maintain that in the component somewhere. So we're going to use state, the useState hook, to maintain that. So what we need to do next is we need to import the useState hook from the React library, like that. And we need to tell this component that we're going to maintain state for, let's call it search term. And we need to set the search term setter, use state, and we're going to initialize it as an empty string. Yeah, that should work. So let's go with that, and then let's see here. When the user types in a term into the input, which is this element right here, we want to track that in this term right here, search term state object. So first thing we need to do is connect the onChange handler of this input to some sort of callback. So let's say here on input typed. And this will take an event argument, and let's pass this in to the onChange handler of the input. And for the time being, let's have a console log on input typed, and it should be event target, which is the input, and then the value, which is the letters typed into the input. So let's see what we have there. So let's go ahead and run the npm run serve. I'm going to open the console here. So option command I. Let's reload. Let's clear out the console. And now we have the onInput typed callback. So that means it's working. Let's see here. Great. So now what we can do is when this is being called back, we can set the search term using the hook provided by useState. And this will actually maintain the characters entered into the input as this search term string right here. So it's being stored in this string right here. So if I'm going to actually comment that out and reload, it should go away. Nothing shows up here, but now what we want to do is connect this go button to a click handler, an on click. So let's create another function for that. On search button clicked. and that's going to be this button right here. So we want to take the onClick handler and bind this onSearch button clicked method. Buttons don't actually contain an event argument with it, so we can just ignore that. But let's do a console log, and then let's do search term. So this is the value that's being currently held in the state, this search term state right here. I'm just going to collapse these arrays. Okay, so this is being updated as the user types into the input field, and then when we click the onSearch button, the current value of the search term should be console logged in the output. So let's go ahead and give that a run. And there it is. So now what we can do is use this to run a query on a podcast search API to return a list of podcasts with that fit the term. So it should really be something like this, sports or news or politics, something like that. So let's go ahead and set that up. So what we're going to do is we're going to import a HTTP request library called Axios. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn off the server here and turn off the build. And we're going to do npm install. And we want to import the Axios request library like that. So make sure you have that. Go ahead and run that. And what we want to do next is run a query using a search API for podcasts. Now, luckily, the iTunes Apple search platform gives us a very easy to use REST API. Well, it's not really REST API, just a very easy to use API for querying for podcasts, and we're going to take advantage of that right now. So let's go ahead and test it out. Let's open up our routes and the main.js, and let's create another get handler called search. This is going to be a get, and we're going to res next. First thing we want to do is just make sure that this is even properly connected. So I'm just going to do a quick, sorry, okay, there we go. This is the search endpoint. So let's go ahead and test that out real quick, make sure that that's properly connected. There it is, right there. So we're good to go. So now what we want to do is from here, we want to query the iTunes Apple search API using the Axios request library. So let's go ahead and import Axios right here. So const Axios require. Okay, I'm actually going to put that over here. And over here, what we want to do is make a request to the iTunes Search API using Axios, and then returning the results from that to conduct our search. So what we need to do is get a URL first. Let me punch up the URL real quick. Here is an example of the URL. Okay, so go ahead and grab that. I'm just going to get rid of these so it's easier to see. So here is a sample request from the Apple iTunes search platform that we can use to just get a bunch of podcast results. Excuse me, podcast results, querying for a specific term. We can even filter it by country, and obviously we want podcasts. So for now, we're just going to hard code this. So we want to copy this and then head back here and just paste it in, and we're just going to run this search every time for now. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to grab the response from Axios, and we need to pass in the URL. The method is going to be a get, and I'm going to pass in options for headers. I don't think we really need to do this part, but this is a good practice. Accept application This is going to return JSON, so we want to tell the response to expect that. This is going to be an asynchronous call. So what we want to do is set up an async and then an await like that. And then the response, actually we can just parse out the data from the response right away. That's all we really need. So let's go ahead and do that. And then let's go ahead and just return the JSON raw data like this. So here we're just proxying it from the iTunes request, the iTunes podcast search. We're making the request using the Axios library, and then we're grabbing the data from the request, and then we're just returning it right back. We're just proxying the request via iTunes. So let's go ahead and test that out. And here is what we get from iTunes. So we have 50 results. We're currently always searching for sports, so we're hard coding that for now. And so everything here should have something to do with sports. And this is the result set from iTunes, which Apple provides for free, which is very generous. So this is going to be our search functionality in our podcast app. And if you're wondering, by the way, how my JSON is formatted this way, I'm using a JSON formatting plugin called Json Formatter. So on Google Chrome, just do the Google Chrome store and search for Json Formatter, which is a plugin, Chrome extension. And just go ahead and plug this in, and you should get the same formatting that I see on my side, which makes it a lot easier to read the results. So this is going to be our podcast results set. I think it will be easier to clean this up a little bit before we return everything right back from iTunes. So let's go ahead and clean it up a little bit. Let's see here. We want to get the results array. So const results from the data. And we want to return the results. Okay, so here we just have the array of results. I am going to put that inside of a JSON object. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to, let's see the best way to do this. Podcasts. And let's go through the results. Let's map through the result. And we're going to go through this like so, and we're going to return let's see. Podcast. We want the artist name. So we want to call that name and then artist name. Track name. This is going to be our artwork. Let's go with this one right here. Okay, so this is what we're going to use for the sidebar right here. Okay, so let's do artwork URL 100. So let's go with icon. And let's, oh wait, maybe we got a bigger one right here. Yeah, I like this one better. Let's go with that one. So artwork URL 600. and an array of genres. And that's what we're going to use right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So genres. Okay, let's see what we get there, and let's return the podcasts array instead, like that. And let's make sure nothing is crashing, and let's see what we get now. So now we just have a much easier set of results to loop through on the client side. This sort of cleans up the data from iTunes and returns only what we want. So hopefully that makes sense. Actually, we are going to need one more thing as well. So let me go back and show the results again. We are also going to need the feed URL, and this is where we get the actual MP3s. So we'll call that feed. And let's try that. And we want to return the actual podcasts. And now we have the feed. Great. Okay, great. So now this is everything we need on the client side, on the React side, to render the results of podcasts. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create another route using a post handler. So this is going to be a post, and then it's going to be search. And that's also going to take a request response and next argument. And we're basically going to do the same exact thing. We're just going to copy and paste this. Okay. But we are going to grab the term, search term, from the request body, because the post request type gives us a request body. Let's pass it in as term. And the search term is what's going to go right here. So let's get rid of this and use backticks for that. And then we can just take this term query argument and just put in search term instead, like that. And that will make it more robust in terms of searching for podcasts. Then we can enter anything, like it doesn't have to be sports every single time. So this is basically just for testing, and this is the one we're actually going to use. So we need to send a post request to our server, which will then proxy the iTunes search API and return to us the data in the format that we want, like we're doing right here. So let's go ahead and run this on the React side. So what I'm going to do now, whoops, I forgot the async. Don't forget that, because we're running async and then await, so don't forget that. Okay, great. Let's head back to the React side now and start running these searches. So right here on the search button clicked is where we want to run that search. Well, we can use the Axios library here as well. So import Axios. Okay. And over here, we want to, let's see, pass in the URL. Let's see, so we're doing /search. This time the method is post. Excuse me, post, because we set up a post handler. Options, headers, accept, application, JSON, and we need to pass in a body, and it is expecting term, and that's going to be the search term right here. Okay, now this is also an async await, so don't forget to do async await here. And we really just want to, sorry, excuse me. async. All right, and then we really just want to destructure the data out here like that. And let's see what we get here. So podcasts, that's going to be a JSON object, so we need to stringify the JSON. And that's giving us a clean build on Webpack. Everything looks good. Let's see what we get. So let's head back to the localhost 3000. And let's see here, what do we got? Regenerator runtime is not defined. I must have made a mistake somewhere. Okay, let's comment this out and see what's going on. Okay, I'm getting an error on the async await here, so I'm going to run this as a promise. So I'm going to run it as a promise instead. And let's have a catch block here. I'm going to destructure the data out here instead. And let's see. And then we need to console log here, and let's see what we get. Sports. And here is the result set we get from our backend. Notice how it says podcast right here, and that is the same query as we were running over here. And so that should be everything we need. Okay, so let's go ahead and render these results now. To be totally honest, I'm not entirely sure why the async await was giving us the problem there, but async await is just an alternative to promises. So instead, I promisified the Axios call just to get by that problem. It's neither here nor there. What I would normally do is extract this out into a utility function, into a utility library somewhere in here, and run that through an async await call. It's probably something to do with the functional component on React, for some reason not giving us the async await functionality here, but we can probably run it through like a helper method. Anyway, the promise here works fine, so let's go ahead and use this to render the results. So now what we want to do is take these podcasts right here. This array of podcasts is what determines what shows up here. So what we want to do is use the state for that as well. So const podcasts set podcasts, use state. We want to initialize this as an empty array, and then we want to get rid of these. So now that these are gone, and we're using the state instead. When I reload the UI, there should be an empty list over here. But now what I can do, we have name, image, categories. Name, image, and categories. So in our search response, we want to do name and then image and categories. Notice how we are matching up the schema that is expected on the React side. So name, image, and categories, name, image, and categories. So that when we set the podcasts over here, so what we can do is set podcasts and then data podcasts, the schema will already match up. So then that way, it should give us an array here that is consistent. And there it is. Getting some undefined here, not really sure what's happening, but these are all podcasts over here from the iTunes search results. And then if I want to try something like politics, okay, let's try news. Must be getting a lot of the same results, so that's kind of strange. Let's see what we're doing here. Term. So we want to pass in term to the search body. So let's see what we're getting for a URL here, because the results are the same every single time. So I'm probably making a mistake in the search query itself somewhere. Okay, let's give it a shot. So let's see if we do sports. You see here the search is undefined, the term is undefined. So iTunes is just running this search every single time. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we're looking for the term over here in the request body, and I am passing it in as term, but this is probably should be data, excuse me, not the body. So let's try that again. Let's reload the UI here and do sports again. Search term. Okay, so this should be that. Okay. Let's try it again. There we go. Now we're seeing sports over here, and the term says sports right there. Hopefully you can see that. Now if I try something like news or politics, let's try that instead. Politics. Let's get rid of that. And now the results change, and the results are more consistent with what we were looking for, what we searched for. Something I forgot, by the way, is we need to, when we create an array of here, right here, the key is a podcast ID, but we did not assign a podcast ID in the API handler. So there is no ID in here, so we're just returning null every single time, and that's why we're getting that key error. That's why we're getting that key error before. That's not showing up now, but let me just run it again so you can see what I'm talking about. Right here. That's because the key is returning null every single time, and that's no good. So what we want to do is return the actual search ID, the podcast ID. Apple, I'm sure, provides that. So let's go ahead and find it in our test endpoint right here. It's always good to have a test endpoint for things like this. So I'm going to restore the test endpoint with the results directly from iTunes, and then we're going to hit the test endpoint, and we're going to use the artist ID. Yeah, let's go with that, artist ID. Okay, so let's go back here to the API and set an ID as the podcast artist ID. And this ID is what will be used for the key iterator over here so we can get rid of that error. So let's go ahead and make sure that that happens. And now we're getting the artist keys are the same. So okay, so something else we can do instead is just use the index. So inside this mapping iterator, we probably get an index, and we can do IDX instead and see what we get instead. Okay, and that will take care of that. Frankly, we should handle this a little bit better. We should find a unique identifier, probably track ID, because track ID is unique across all of these tracks. But for now, I just want to get something working and get rid of that error, and also just so you understand where that error is coming from in the first place and why it's happening. But this looks good so far, and let's go ahead and try a different term, politics. Looks good. And then fashion. Great. Okay, great. So that's going to be where we finish off for this video, but what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to fix it so that when you click on one of these, like this one right here, it will populate this section with the actual MP3 files, the audio tracks of the selected podcast. So then you can click on one, and then you can play the most recent tracks of that podcast, so that we're not just searching for podcasts and that's it, sports. But before I go ahead and wrap this up, I'm going to make one minor adjustment on the search term. Well, let's get rid of this console log. On the search term query over here, we're going to want to trim this and then to lowercase like that. A couple things you want to be mindful of. For example, if the user didn't type in any search term, we want to block this search from running. You want to throw some sort of alert. We also have no error handling here, so I would never actually run this in production for that reason. So little things like that you want to be mindful of, and it's probably a good idea to follow up on this video on how to handle an error like this, and how to block, do some very simple validation, how to block a search from running when the user didn't enter any search term. But the very last thing we're going to do in this video is I'm going to run a production build. And then we're going to throw this up on staging and make sure it works on staging as well. Okay, the production build is ready. Let's go ahead and throw this up on the staging environment and test it over there. Okay, the deployment is up. Let's go ahead and hit the staging URL. And we have nothing here because we didn't do any searches yet. So let's do sports. And there we go. And let's try politics. Looks good. Okay, great. So now this is working on staging, which we just confirmed. So everything is good to go. Hopefully got all that working. I apologize for the few mistakes that I made along the way, but we got those fixed up and everything is working on the live hosting environment as well. So hopefully the same goes for you. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.